panel. So excited to have everybody join us. Before we begin, I just want to have just acknowledge that WeBC is situated in the unceded and traditional territory of the Salix Okanagan people, which is today known as Kelowna. And we're so grateful to be able to live and work and play on this land here. On that, I know that you are all coming from all over the province. So if you want to acknowledge also your traditional territory that you're from, definitely put that into the chat as we kind of move through and take a moment just to recognize the lands that we get to be from here in BC. So on that, I noticed last night that on top of us celebrating and doing this event as a part of International Women's Day is not until next week. You haven't misread the calendar. We decided to host it ahead of time because there's so much going on with live activities within every different community across our province that for WeBC, for us to host it virtually, to be able to bring and gather our community together, we figured an online event a week ahead of time was going to be the best thing for us.
I found this on the web.
Oops, sorry, my watch just decided to chime in. And so on that, we decided to choose today. And then last night, I also realized it's also Pink Shirt Day. And so Pink Shirt Day is to acknowledge and to make sure that we bring visible and counter homophobia and transphobia and anti-bullying. And so I think there's this extra energy and power to today with it both being bringing in kind of International Women's Day as well as Pink Shirt Day. So I always say annually for International Women's Day that, it's a global day, not just a Canadian or BC day, but a global day to celebrate women and girls and kind of the social, economic, cultural, and political achievements, but also to raise awareness on the progress being made, but also work that still needs to be done as we move towards more gender equality. And with that, I often look at reports and stats. We base a lot of our decisions at WeBC on different stats and on the work that still needs to be done. And as much as there are currently, there's a report that I think, Jen, if you want to pop.
I didn't get that.
Oh my goodness, my watch really wants to be. I'm just going to take it off. I'm not sure why it keeps chiming in. That with our reporting, there's the report that's a state of women entrepreneurship. And as much as there is still obviously progress, the report shows that it used to be 18% of women-owned businesses. We have increased it now from the 15% in 2017 to now 18% of women-owned businesses across Canada. There's still work that needs to be done. And so this is something that a reason by pulling together this panel is not only to acknowledge that work still needs to be done in our ecosystem, but on top of it, the report had pulled something that really stood out to me there was a stat in there that really talked about the proportion of majority-owned women businesses and how the majority of equity deserving groups has actually decreased. So this is actually for Indigenous and racialized people. The statistics of the number of women-owned businesses from 2017 to 2020 has actually decreased in the number of women that are owning businesses in racialized and Indigenous groups. And so it fits, the theme of International Women's Day and the panel that we're having today. This panel is about inclusivity. And so it's something that for us to bring and gather this panel together. So before I jump in, I know many of you know our community and you signed up because you're part of our community. Jen, do you mind hopping over to the slide about WeBC? Oh, that's me. We don't need that one. So just in case those of you have joined us in other areas of WeBC, so that you know, we started off as a loan fund. We offer loans up to $150,000 plus an additional $50,000 from another partner organization that we have. And so if you are looking to fund your business at all and to grow your business or to start your business, come and see us and come and talk to one of our business advisors. There's also both the advising side as well as the loans. And then we offer skills development. Many of you probably have joined us through either programs like this or our coffee chats or some of our courses that we offer. We do skills development workshops. And then another way of many of our community joins us is through our mentoring. So we do offer mentoring for both startup as well as growth. And then on top of it, we have this supportive community that hosts events like this, but also local events in your local community. We try to amplify different events that women are hosting across our province. So if you don't know about all of these different ones, hop onto our website, and you can also message us and connect with our client service team as well. So on to the next slide, Jen. And today, welcome. I am so excited to be able to pull together this panel. And so if you want to go ahead and spotlight them, I'm going to slowly kind of go over the different panelists that we do have. So we brought in Kelsey Pringle, who I got to meet at the UPLIFT Business Summit just this past year. Kelsey is the owner of 5 Star Media Group and co-founder of the UPLIFT Women's Business Summit that was hosted in Victoria this past year. Welcome, Kelsey. We also have Ashley Ramsay, founder and CEO of The Wanderer and the 5th series. She's also a board director of Accelerate Okanagan and an investor of the Women's Equity Lab. And Ashley, bringing her in because she was in the tech industry where, you know, in the tech sector, definitely underrepresented number of women. We also have Alissa Assu, from the owner of RavenSong Soap and Candle, Bare Essential Oils, and West Coast Wildflowers. So Ali has joined us from, is it Campbell River? Sorry, Ali. I was just, yeah, from Campbell River.
Yes, it is from the Campbell River. Yeah. The
So
Weebaka in the Weebaka territory.
Perfect, perfect. And sorry, welcome, Ashley. I said you're a little close by and didn't even welcome you in. So yeah. And then Laurence Rich, from the owner of Flora Rich Creations, a floral shop here in Kelowna that does more than flowers, workshops, and bringing community and gathering together as well. So welcome to the panel as well, Laurence.
Thank you for having me.
So let's jump right in. You know, I said a little bit about your bios, but I'd love for you to share with our members that are on today and our community here a little bit about yourself and what you do and kind of why you said yes to being a part of the panel today. So let's start off, Kelsey, you're kind of on the top of my screen here. Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Well, hi, everyone. It's so nice to be here. And thanks to you, Shauna and WeBC for involving me. So my name is Kelsey Pringle. I am one of the co-founders of the UPLIFT Women's Business Summit. I also am an entrepreneur and started a marketing agency 8 years ago. The reason I wanted to be here is through UPLIFT, I've had the honor to connect and work alongside amazing organizations such as WeBC, but as well as many women entrepreneurs and women who are scaling their careers within organizations. And it really brought to the spotlight the silent struggles women face and how hard those silent struggles are when you are alone and isolated and feeling, feeling like you're doing it all on your lonesome. And so through being a part of panels like this and having continued engagement and conversations, those struggles are no longer silent. You're no longer alone, and you have the resources, the tools, and more importantly, the community to help guide you in the right direction and feel supported. So that's why I wanted to be here today and to hear from all of these amazing women who are also on the panel.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. And Laurence, you're right here from Kelowna. Why don't you hop on next?
Yes. First of all, thank you for having me. My name is Laurence Rich. I am a floral designer and I own Flourish Creations here in Kelowna. Flourish Creations, a flower shop and lifestyle boutique. The reason why I wanted to be here is very simple. I wanted to represent. There's not a lot of us Black-owned business owners in Kelowna and in the province of British Columbia. So whenever opportunities like this come up, unless it doesn't work with my schedule, I like to be there and meet other fellow business owners as well, but mostly because I want to represent my people.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And Ashley, you're the next page here.
Hey everyone, I'm Ashley. I'm here because I hope that our stories resonate with even just anyone in the room today. I just think it's good for us to share our stories and our struggles together so that we can feel heard and seen in our journeys. So a little bit about me really quick. Sold my 4th business last year. It was an animation studio here in Canada. I am now on to other adventures, of course. As Shauna mentioned, I've founded a couple of new little companies, but I think the most recent one that is applicable today is a co-venture with another fellow entrepreneur female that will be launching this spring. So more to come on that. Super stoked to be here. Thank you so much, WeBC, for the opportunity.
Thanks, Ashley. And Ali, last but definitely not least, go ahead.
Hadit, hello, Denise 8 Skies 8 Sakozet. My name is Assu. I'm from the Wet'suwet'en First Nation side on my grandmother and Nishka on my papa's side. I acknowledge my grandparents as they are the ones that raised me. I grew up in a skip generation home, which is quite, often and unique for a lot of Indigenous families. Yes, Shauna did say a mouthful of the businesses that I do own. So West Coast Wildflowers was this dream to have Indigenous women in competitive retail spaces, and believing that as BIPOC women, we've reached the time to be in those spaces. Bare Essential Oils, of course, as it sounds, is an essential oil company that we specialize in organic and ethical, well crafted. And finally, so honored and so excited. I'm actually doing a 2-year elder mentorship pathway to ownership for RavenSong. It was a business that received the opportunity to be bought out by the Dragon's Den, but it was certainly more important to keep it as 2nd generation owned and a legacy for our Indigenous communities bigger than myself. So honored to be here. One of the reasons I wanted to be here was I recently did the Gallup strength test for any of you that know that or don't know that, and trying to acknowledge where my top 5 strengths are. And it was because of my WeBC mentor that I did this. And number 1 strength was activator, and acknowledging that I just have to own that, right? That I am a catalyst, that I want to influence others, and I want to be that voice for Indigenous women where possible. So Tabi Masai, thank you for having me here.
Well, thank you so much. And you have an amazing mentor. I know who she is. And we are very much on a strength space as an organization. So thank you for sharing your strength there. And thank you for being with us. So the report that I keep mentioning back to, the State of Women Entrepreneurship, one of the other pieces it shared too was that Indigenous women, Black women, and other racialized women face significant barriers above and beyond other women that they have researched. And I know, Laurence, you said in it that, you want to make sure that you represent. So then my next question really is, each of you have faced kind of different adversity as women entrepreneurs. Maybe Laurence, you can start with just helping us set the stage for this conversation by telling us some of the, I guess, invisible and visible barriers and obstacles that you've had to face.
Yeah, I'm going to start by saying that I'm a 1st-generation immigrant. My parents immigrated from Africa. And in a lot of immigrant families, you go to school and then you go to university, you become a doctor, a lawyer, anything with, big education was always kind of like the plan. And so when I decided that I was going to go into entrepreneurship, there wasn't a lot of people around me who could offer guidance. And so I started with like a lot of ignorance. I didn't know the resources that were out there. I didn't know, all the steps to take to like start a legit business, accountant and all of those things. So I think I made a lot of mistakes, unfortunately, based on ignorance. I didn't see myself in a lot of the people who could have offered guidance when I first started my business. So I think that was the biggest barrier when I started Flourish.
Perfect. Thank you. And Ali, how about you? I know there was definitely different ones and how your mentor came about as well. So if you can share some of those, I guess, adversity that you faced as an Indigenous entrepreneur.
Certainly. I mean, the first one for all women, but particularly for Indigenous women that is unique in Canada, is access to capital and accessing funding. Many of you guys may not know this, but my husband and I, when you move on reserve and you try to get a loan with a bank, our home, as beautiful as it is actually worth nothing to a bank. So we sold our house off reserve because we wanted our kids to grow up in our territory. We wanted them to be able to walk to the soccer field and play with the, you know, the Weebakay First Nations. And so that was a very big learning curve of getting the door shut from every single bank and not believing in my dream 3 years ago. There are access to, of course, Indigenous funding, but it doesn't come without higher interest rates than the banks will offer you. So certainly that is a huge barrier that I faced as an Indigenous woman. And so to learn from that, and something that I highly recommend to any woman going in business, is before you start finding a mentor, is seeking out a mentor in the industry that you wish to seek, because often they've done the mistakes, they've done the learning curve for you. And so one of my mentors was Erin Brillen from Totem Design House. They are family, but that she already has a business on reserve. She knows how to understand the financing. She knows how to get you started. So if that is the biggest advice and barrier is, you know, financing, is already go to someone who's in your industry. And I hope that helps someone here on the call today.
And at that point, you didn't know about WeBC as well, just so that.
That's right. I didn't know about WeBC. And when it comes to financing, Shauna and I, we discussed this on our private call amongst us, is I think financial literacy is not strong in the general public in our school systems, but it's certainly not strong in Indigenous communities. You will often hear that money is trauma in our communities. And I don't really want to explain that to the ladies on the call today, because I want to invite you to really do some research on that, and so that you have a better understanding and that you are able to kind of take that in and how you understand that. But you know, because of those reasons, it can be a very traumatic experience for a lot of Indigenous women wanting to start businesses, and also wanting to uplift our culture in the same manner. So thank you, Shauna.
And Ashley, I mean, part of this report as well, you know, shared kind of women-centered programs and incubators and accelerators in the tech industry, but there's embedded biases in these offerings, and they don't have inclusive policies and practices. And so that was definitely something I'd read in the report. So are you able to share kind of maybe some of the adversity, you know, you faced as a tech entrepreneur, and invisible barriers or visible barriers even?
100%. So I guess just kind of piggybacking off of what Ali was speaking through her experiences with the banking system, I'll take another spin on this and I'll speak a little bit to raising equity from the investment side. You know, I remember pitching one of my, well, it was my third company, and part of the ethos of that company was my struggle as a mom to collect hundreds of photographs of my children for photo books. And, you know, so my pitch included this whole thing about being a mom. And I just remember submitting that to my mentors at a particular acceleration program. And there was a comment that said, you know, you might want to remove that from the deck. And so, you know, I just want to sort of like lean into that story of that as mothers, raising capital. So I've raised like millions, and like I've raised over $2 million in capital for my last business, equity, and non-dilutive funding. The banks are less, you know, I think we're coming a long way, Shauna, and I'm sure you guys are aware at WeBC, like beautiful that WeBC has like programs for funding, you know, Scotiabank Women's Initiative, if anybody's in this that might want to become aware of that programming. BDC, absolutely fabulous. Like I cannot say enough good things about the BDC. But when you need so much money, you need to cobble together money from different places. And so I'll just let the next beautiful lady go, and I will zip up by saying that That's been the hardest thing, is going into rooms where it's all male investors. Well, one last thing I wanted to say to that is that there are a lot of changes happening in the equity investment space to I mean, we have a fund here in the Okanagan. If anybody's here from the Okanagan or British Columbia, we are investing right now actively the women angel network. So please, look us up. We are doing active investments. We just invested in apricot and rain stick showers, 2 female businesses that are just doing so great. So I want to end on a positive note that yes, these are experiences that we have in the fundraising rooms, but we are making progress. So just leaving it on a high note.
Yeah. And we're hoping to we're in that space now, in the sense that we have a program that
Great.
we
Yeah.
just had the second cohort go through that is helping to support women looking to go into venture capital because of stories that we've heard like yours. So thank you so much, Ashley. And Kelsey, I mean, you had, a couple hundred women, so you probably heard a lot of different, stories of adversity that women had to face. How about yours? If you can just set the stage kind of on that and what some of those barriers and that you might have had to face.
Yeah. It's interesting because I know that there were barriers. I was blind to them. I was my barrier. And that was interesting. Through UPLIFT, I really had to reflect on the years of scaling my other business and what I was up against. And I really ignored, and I kind of identify it as trauma, but the amount of trauma you go through when you're building your business. If you're a mom, you're constantly dealing with guilt. If you're a wife or a partner, you probably feel like you're failing. If you're bringing on staff, you're constantly worried if you're going to be able to support them. And to stop and reflect and be able to kind of look at the macro and find the various resources, mentorships, is sometimes hard, because I had a shark-like mentality. It was like, keep swimming or you're going to die, like keep hustling. So if you're here on the call, you're already a step ahead of me of where I was a year ago, because I didn't know about WeBC. I didn't know about all of these amazing programs that are available, but the barrier that I overcame was I got really curious, and I really started to, and through UPLIFT, we wanted to create an epicenter where all of that information can be housed. So you're not having to sit there and Google everything. You can come and see all of the options and all of the support groups and resources and funding opportunities, and get informed on financial literacy, which is an enormous barrier. And I agree with Ali that there's trauma associated to that. Like you see that and you go, you shy away, debt is bad. How do you leverage that effectively? So getting curious and overcoming those barriers and actually pausing and going like, oh, I'm not okay. And that's okay. Let's become better. I think is a common silent struggle among women entrepreneurs as a whole. So that's kind of where I was and where I am now in terms of barriers.
Right. And so what have you each done kind of, I guess, to overcome the barriers, to gain traction in your business? Because that's something that you obviously had some of these barriers in place, but then kind of overcame that. I know, Ali, your story, you obviously found funding, and you also created, you were talking about the model of buying out the other business and working with the previous owner on a 2-year plan. Can you share maybe that?
Yeah, of course. So, this 2-year plan started 6 months ago. And, part of it was acknowledging, often Indigenous women, I think women in general, but, particularly in the roots of my community, that we often lead with heart work. What feels good, what fills our cup, what is going to give back to the community, but also acknowledging there's finances with that, there's learning curves. And because I'm still a new entrepreneur, I'm only 3 years into the entrepreneurial world, and it's been a large learning opportunity to scale from not one business, but to 3. And the reason why we chose kind of an elder mentorship pathway is it was really important for me not to just purchase a business, and not just to make money off of it and to profit. And if certainly that is the goal of business, I understand that. But for me, it was a legacy of how do we keep the storytelling going? With RavenSong, every bar tells a story, every scent tells a story. How do we interweave our cultural stories or our childhood memories of fishing on a boat, harvesting food fish, harvesting, berries? And that's where I want to lead RavenSong. I want to, and Valerie understood that, and that is exactly why we sold it. But in that process, similar to Lawrence, I learned a lot of errors. I learned a lot of mistakes in my first 2 businesses, and I brought that with me over to the third businesses. And that was hiring a lawyer. As much as Valerie and I love each other, we trust each other. People often think I'm her daughter or her niece when we go to markets. We get these like awe moments because she's, we call her kind of like the hot auntie, the hot nanai, which nanai is grandmother in Haida. But acknowledging you don't know what you don't know. You don't know what's going to come up in the business. And that while your work can be heart work, we wanted to make sure that we turned this business more than heart work. We wanted to make it stable that, when I pass, when my husband passes, that this goes to another Indigenous community and another Indigenous family, so that we are creating generational storytelling and generational financial, capacity for our communities, and that I'm setting up this company so that there's manuals, there's policies, that there's a sure way to ensure the legacy of this business. And so I've always been driven by something greater than me. And you'll often find in a lot of Indigenous women, whether it's Patrice at Satya or Squalin, that we're always trying to do something bigger than ourselves.
Yeah, so Valerie, you purchased it from Valerie, and now she's doing a 2-year mentorship
Yeah.
on top of selling the business. And
Yes.
that's the piece. So it would make sure everyone has the full story of that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And so what the 2-year mentorship looks like, it means learning not only how to make candles, how to make soap, how to make bath salts, but it's understanding the story of how we got there, what inspired those roots, so that I know where to take it. And I recommend anyone who's purchasing a business, again, is you have your business partner, is you're treating it like a marriage. Valerie and I, it's been a little bit of a struggle because we're both doing something we don't know. And so that's why we pulled out, we dove right into WeBC, and I said, Shauna, I need some help here. And Shauna said, I have the woman for you. And let me tell you, she has been life-changing over the last 3 weeks already. So yeah.
She's in our one-on-one mentoring program. Allie's in our one-on-one mentoring program is what she's talking about there. So thank you. And then Laurence, how about you? What have you done to overcome, you talked about not having the knowledge, like not knowing what you don't know.
Yeah.
And so how have you, you've navigated the pandemic, you've navigated, as many people on the call have, like, how did you do that and gain some traction in your business? Because you are a very successful business here in Kelowna. So
I became obsessed with my business, but like the insides of my business. Obviously, I own a flower shop, so it's beautiful. Like I get this every day, like, oh, you must have so much fun, like playing with flowers all day. And as much as it is aesthetically pleasing to be a florist, the back end is not as pretty. And so I became obsessed with just finding out what I don't know. And I'm working on that like obsession. It's become a little bit much, but I started asking questions. I reached out to other people who have done it before, not locally because there isn't as many flower shops here in Kelowna, but I reached out to people on Instagram and asked questions. I took some courses. I really wanted to know what I didn't know about my business. And I think that when I started, originally I started in 2017 as just a wedding florist out of my garage. And even building my cooler, that was like a 3-month process, So like, I feel like if you want to be an entrepreneur, if you want to make change, it's important to know that you don't know everything, and there's no shame in asking questions. And I think that now that I've learned, I'm comfortable asking questions now. I want to put myself in a position where other people can look at me and say, I feel like I can go and ask her, whether or not it's a flower business or just a business, or juggling a business and being a mom, like there's so many different layers of me and owning a business. So ask questions. Don't be afraid to reach out. I think entrepreneurship is such a lonely place if you let it become that. You cannot speak to other entrepreneurs for weeks, and then you go to a network event and it's like, oh my gosh, we're going through the same thing. I wish I would have known, So reach out, ask questions. I don't think there's anything wrong with not knowing what you're doing. And we learn every day. I'm sure everyone here has learned something yesterday and can share that knowledge with the next person. So yeah.
And Laurence was a keynote at a local event here, and you shared something about setting boundaries and setting, I was taking notes as you were writing it down about systems that you had put into your team and boundaries so that you could have family time, because you were getting emails kind of all the time and everything. So do you want to mention just quickly maybe some of the boundaries and some of the, I don't know.
Yes. My favorite boundary is the easiest one ever, and it's automatic email replies. I set those at 4:59 p.m. on a Friday. You send me an email at 8 p.m. Know that I've received it, but I'm not answering. And earlier on in my business, I would respond, like you get an email, and also like you get it on your phone. Set those, like the easiest boundaries you can set are the ones that you don't have to actually say yes or no to, like anything automatic, emails, phone, the notifications, silence them when you don't want to be disturbed. And then also the biggest boundary that I have with my team, and it's also a boundary that I encourage them to have, is to no texting work outside of working hours. Like we share pictures with each other and stuff like that, but I don't want you to text me about your schedule on a Sunday morning. And I will never also text my employee on a Sunday morning asking about something work related. So I think setting boundaries is extremely important, and it's really hard, especially us females. I don't know what it is, but we're like natural people pleasers. Like we can't help ourselves. So set those boundaries.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. Ashley, how did you gain traction? Because you gained traction in an industry that, having to raise the capital, having to be told you can't present about your family when the whole product was about family. The bias is there alone. I remember you telling me that story and being completely shocked. How did you gain traction? What are some of the ways that you've overcome some of these barriers that you've had to face?
Yeah, sure. Just to what Laurence was saying before that, so I just put a little note. I for many, many years, block off between 2 and 4 o'clock every day to be with my kids if I can. My assistants, everybody in the organization always knew that I would never be available, so it became habit. So just wanted to plug that in. Thank you, Laurence, for that about boundaries. It's so important. And then I had prepared an answer around, and then I'll get to the traction, being the change. So years and years ago, WeBC offered me an opportunity to mentor a small group, and the things that I came away with that I took from that, right? So I call it what I'm now calling it is an energy exchange, right? So maybe there's not a fee for service or something, but you are exchanging that energy of, I am giving you the lessons that I have learned, and in exchange, I will receive from you through seeing you learn your lessons. So I think that's really important for us women to support each other in that way. How we scaled was really fast. So and I'm not sure who's in the room and where everybody's at in their businesses, but where I'm planning to focus my energy is with women who have either a desire to scale their business or are already on the cusp of scaling, because there is a lack of support. I didn't have any support around scaling. So things like raising $500,000 to do leasehold improvements, raising $350,000 to buy 100 computers, literally, and have them arrive within 8 weeks. Scaling my management team. How was I going to structure that team that was going to support us? So did we really need a full-time HR? Was it a fractional accountant? which is ultimately what we did. And I think a lot of people, and I hope that this resonates with someone or anyone, is that I think exploring like ways to use fractional help and the help of these organizations in very prescribed ways is the ultimate, I think that's the ultimate sort of secret sauce to scaling and really getting traction. You ultimately know how your business is doing. You know how many customers, you know when you got a big contract, so, or you know if it's coming, and just hopefully you have enough lead time to put some of these things in place. But yeah, you know, it is a lot of just digging in and getting it done. But if you can find non-dilutive funding in those early stages, so if BDC has projections that show that you can take, you know, they can click $150,000 like tomorrow with the click of a button on their iPad. I don't know if anyone knows that. You know, you have to submit your financials and such, but you know, if you're at that stage where you need equipment, you need, you know, an extra 1,000 square feet, like don't be afraid, just jump in and it will all come together eventually. Yeah, hopefully that's a succinct answer. A little bit of channeling of like multiple things, but
Yeah, what you said about the mentorship, I mean, I was, you know, I'm, yes, the CEO now, but for 13 years, I was a mentor as well as MNT at one point for the Taking the Stage program. And being a mentor gives you as much energy and momentum in your business. So I fully agree on that there with you. And then what you said about traction, you know, we are in the process, we haven't launched it yet, but we're in the process of launching an operations course that is based on the book Traction, based on setting up systems that are in your organization around those pillars of HR and finance and marketing, and how to then turn around and get traction in your business. And so I'm super excited to be able to share that course eventually with our team working hard on that. And so what you talked about there, getting the fractional support, but prior to that, knowing kind of what you need and the planning stages of it is what that course is about. So mark that down, ladies, if you're looking for a course on that traction and scaling piece, it is coming soon. And yes, the book is often talked about in entrepreneurship. So definitely pick up the book if you haven't as well. So Kelsey, I mean, for you, the barriers of connecting and the barriers, you know, you've created something or about to launch. I don't know if you're going to be sharing it. Sorry, I realize that as I'm going to have to finish my sentence now. On your platform, is that something you're willing to share about? Because I think that's a big piece of helping women businesses gain traction, networks. You know, I think of your UPLIFT event, and yeah, I'll hand that over to you now that I kind of opened that can of worms.
No, that's great. Yeah. So we're very excited. So we are just around the corner. We're aiming for March 8th to launch the 2024 event, which is going to be at the Pan Pacific on November 18th and 19th this year in Vancouver, which we're very excited about. I can't officially announce our keynote speakers, but I can tell you that they are out of this world. And then we're going to be doing some amazing workshops and have great networking opportunities. But I think in overcoming those barriers like that were mentioned, I mean, these types of networking events are so needed. And dialing down, like there's lots of events out there and I've gone to them and they've been really good. And I don't knock a single one, but what I often find, and I call it static electricity, where it's like you've rubbed a balloon against your head, you're supercharged, you stick it to the wall and it falls down. And so what we want to do with our partnerships with like WeBC coming into UPLIFT is we want to make it sticky. It's going to stick. You're going to leave and that information sticks and you're able to walk out and utilize those tools, access those resources, and hopefully sustainably scale your career, scale your business. I wanted to touch on just really quickly because I'm going through this with my agency. We're 8 years into our agency. We've grown exponentially, and I was actually at it's called the TAP. It's an export course, and WeBC is part of that last week. And we were sitting there, and they had you really go through processes, dialing down what you actually do as a business. And my business partner and I were sitting there and we're like, we do too much. Like we really need to refine what we want to offer and excel at those areas. And so sometimes when you're scaling and you're looking at, you know, what you're going to overcome and how you're going to get there, accessing the funding, fractional help, which I think is super important, and leveraging that in a way. Sometimes you need to trim some of the fat and go like, what are we really good at, and how is that making us money, and how can we do more of that, and less of all of the other distractions that are bogging us down. And I think having those types of internal workshops with, if you have a business partner, or even just sitting in front of a mirror and just talking to yourself through everything, can be really, really valuable. And then go find a mentor, bounce it off them. I didn't have that for the longest time. And if I did, it was the wrong mentor. They didn't quite understand, like, it was a man. So when I'm saying like breastfeeding and like on a Zoom call doing this, they didn't get that. They never had to go through that. And so find someone who is relatable to your circumstance and your industry, and get curious, ask all of the questions. Don't be afraid of looking silly. I realized that I would get self-conscious and just be quiet. And then, and not ask the questions that needed to be asked. Ask them all. If you feel like they're silly, they're probably the right question, because you don't know the answer to it. So yeah, really, really dial it down. Hopefully, that's my tangent. Sorry.
Perfect. No, thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, that's why it's still so important for us, especially in our one-on-one programs, that we hand match our mentors to make sure there's a fit in there, because there's just some things that technology can't do just yet. So just yet. So the next question I want to ask is really about diversity, equity, inclusion. So DEI. I mean, it's an important discussion, but also an action item in businesses today. Are you embedding DEI principles into your business? And if so, what are some of the things that you're doing? Does someone want to jump in on that one? Just looking at Laurence, is that something that
Yes. So for me, I'm going to speak from my perspective of a Black business owner first, and then a flower shop owner. So as a Black business owner, there has been a lot of things that I've had to teach my team on perspective. There was an example that Shauna brought up at our discussion last week regarding deliveries for florals, for example, where we receive some orders online, and some people can add a delivery instruction at the checkout. And one of those notes were to ask the delivery driver to go and leave the flowers in this person's backyard. So open the gate and then go into the backyard and then come back out. And for me, obviously, like, I think of it as, as a Black person's lens, and I would never do that. You will never find me walking into someone's backyard, even though I'm walking in with flowers. There's just so many things that could go wrong from my perspective. And so when I share these perspective with my team, obviously they're like, oh, I've never thought of that. I would probably just open the gate and walk into the backyard. And even a white person is not something that's safe to do. I would not want my team members to do that, period. But adding the layer of perspective from a person of color, there's a lot of steps that we do take with deliveries because of that, because we outsource the deliveries, and some of our drivers are people of color. Some of our drivers are females, we don't deliver after certain times, certain things like that. We have these conversations all the time, and these are protocols that we implement because we have these conversations. And so I think that DEI in big corporations, it's almost like, if you're a big corporation, you should have some sort of, DEI initiatives. But I think small businesses as well should really consider having these conversations with their employees, especially if some of those employees are people of color, are, from different genders, or, even disabled people. Having those conversations allows everyone to feel like their perspective is heard. So for us, we have these conversations. Black History Month is coming to an end. We've talked about it because I'm a Black business owner, so we have these conversations. But I sometimes wonder if those conversations are happening in other businesses. So that's how we do it. We do conversations. We had, the Lunar New Year one of our team members is also of the Asian community. So how do we bring offerings that that other communities can enjoy, not just flowers and for special occasions? So there's different ways that we do it, but I guess it comes to having those conversations.
I love that because I think oftentimes we see what large companies are doing, and as small entrepreneurs, it's kind of like, how do I embed it? And you're talking about in conversation and through lived experiences, people sharing their stories. That's such an incredible way of articulating it. Thank you, Lawrence. Yeah. Ashley, how about you?
Yeah, actually, I was gonna volunteer to just again piggyback off Lawrence. She's like triggering so many good thoughts. Hey, look, I mean, I noticed Shawnee's on the call. Love HR, just doing a plug. Hey, local HR firm pumping her up. They did our handbook. So I kind of want to go to like the integration of the DEI into the legal framework of your company. So this is not just making a gender neutral washroom, which we had to do, you know, this is not a, let's be nice, let's, you know, use our acronyms or whatever. This is actually like you as an employee sign with your signature. It goes into our HR database. And if we encounter any issues with your bias, with your racism, whatever you want to say with regards to DEI, you're done. Like you're out. Sorry, there is no chance. So we actually did integrate it into our legal framework of the employee handbook and onboarding systems. Now, just like to give you guys a little perspective, we started with 5 employees. This was not an issue. We then had 175 employees. It became a massive issue. And yes, there were terminations. It just is what it is. Like you have to ride that really hard line. You can't be gray in that line. It was very, very important to Yeti. We did a lot of initiatives with Indigenous communities. We had one of our first employees was Harley Knife. He still is an advocate for Indigenous artists coming up into the studio. We really put a lot of focus on DEI in our business. With a lot of the LGBTQ community as well, like, you know, so yeah, just make it legal, ladies.
Yeah. The other side of it. Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you.
Can I add something to that?
Sure.
I just love that you said that because I also did my handbook through Love HR, and it just kind of forces you to really look at the culture of your company. And if inclusivity and equality is part of the culture, I think when you sit down and write your employee handbook, a lot of things come up that you just don't think about it. So do a handbook. It's a fun and long process, but I think it's worth it when you're trying to implement DEI initiatives in your business.
Love it. And Shawnee's actually on the call, and she was a past mentor for us, so she's gotten super busy now. Is not a mentor anymore, but obviously been very successful. Our 2 Kelowna businesses there. Ellie and Kelsey, how about you? Are there anything DEI principles that you're embedding in your business or things that you're doing?
You go, I'll go.
I go, you go. Great. Yeah, so for us, obviously this is coming from an Indigenous lens. I struggle with this, and I'll be very honest, when I first opened my business, we were predominantly an Indigenous team. And that has shifted in the last year to being predominantly non-Indigenous, but having, you know, Indigenous staff. And during that time, we didn't have to think about cultural safety. We didn't have to think about cultural awareness or cultural learning, because it was just a bunch of cousins doing what we loved and dance videos and promoting Indigenous women and having just a great time with Indigenous women. And as we started to add in non-Indigenous team members, we realized that there might be a little gap there in history and you know, of just questions that we thought, oh my gosh, this should seem like common sense. And so, you know, working I work in kind of the cultural safety lens for, St. Paul's Hospital, for a couple of research projects that I lead on a national level with Dr. Jay Gill and the renal clinic at St. Paul's. So having to use that lens and bring it over to West Coast Wildflowers, and just understanding, not all of our staff really understand the full legacy and the impact of the socioeconomic of residential school or the 60s scoop, or how teeth pulling was very common in Indigenous communities, where in Haida Gwaii specifically, or northern communities, you'll often see elders with no teeth. And that's because dentists were paid significant, right? But these are all great conversations to have. I think they're important conversations to have, because you never know if a staff is going to get triggered, for example, by a book that we bring into the store about brushing your teeth with your children. So that was right. So there was things that you don't know that come up. And as a young leader, right, I opened this business when I was 27. So I have to be mindful that I'm still trying to find my voice in this, right? Especially when you have a gap of, staff that are 20 or 30 years than me. And that can be intimidating, is finding your voice through a whole team who have, depth knowledge. But there was a point that I was getting to this. We were talking about, sorry, I just lost my train of thought. We were talking about, is that we've recently done a cultural vision board with our staff. And so that is all of us sitting down, and what does culture mean to them, and what does community mean to them, and kind of working with an elder at West Coast Wildflowers for an elder to come in and talk about to merge everything for our team and talk about kind of, a cultural lens that way.
That's
Yeah.
beautiful.
Maybe jump back to Kelsey, and maybe Kelsey, your beautiful words will serenade the idea back in my mind.
Well, I'm just piggybacking off of everyone. So I think it's really important to, build it into your handbook, have HR policies and around it. I think culture is a huge part of this. And in that, like Ali was saying, fostering safety, there's going to be ignorance. I'm ignorant, and having a place of being able to ask questions in a safe environment respectfully is really important, so that you can foster that diversity. And that's when beautiful collaboration within your office happens. That's when true relationships, really take place. A place of safety is so important. If you hardline it in some areas, but you don't actually follow through on the culture and actually stand by the words that you're putting into your handbook, you're not going to get anywhere authentically. So authentically putting it into your culture and fostering that safety for inclusivity, I think is really important. And that's what we try to do within our office.
Perfect. Thank you.
Can I just jump in? I love what Kelsey just said. I just want to kind of like put in bold letters, safety. When you're scaling your company and you are growing and you are adding employees, it is going to be it just compounds the issue if you are not leading with people's safety in mind. That was one of the biggest pain points for us as an organization as we scaled and hired our employees. So I just wanted to say thank you for mentioning that, and just shout out to them.
Perfect. Well, I see that we have about 5 minutes left. Ali, did that thought jump back in? If not, it's okay, but we can.
It did.
Okay.
And that was, we talk about all these great things, and then we put them in binders, or we put them in pamphlets. And granted, they need to be somewhere. So of course they need to be in a binder, but making it visible for our staff, for your staff to constantly go back and remind yourself, right? Whether it's every Friday, you're putting one of the policies on a sticky note, just as like a kind message to your team. We have all of our policies embedded in Basecamp, so that whether it's our high school staff, whether it's our senior management staff, that they can go back if they have a question of, oh, where does this fall? Everything's is accessible to them on their phone. Because I think this is one of the biggest things is issues come up, and then you forget about the book you made, and you put all this love and time and maybe a couple $1,000s, who knows, into making these pamphlets.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Great tip. So, with the time that we have left, you know, I always think there's power in dollars. There's power in how we spend our money. And for International Women's Day, we really want to make sure that we're intentionally supporting and amplifying women's businesses and purchasing from women. How do we convince, I guess, the general world around us to buy more from women? You know, what do you guys wish you had more of? And how do we amplify the diverse voices of women business owners? Kind of maybe end on that at a quick kind of 30-second piece that you're able to say quickly on that, each of you. Lawrence, yeah.
Okay, I'll start. As a retail shop owner, I prioritize female-owned businesses when I source my products. And so when you shop with me, you shop thousands of products that come from women-owned businesses, you know, BIPOC business owners. So I think that it starts with, you know, retail shops making room on their shelves for women, and that's how we are going to keep the economy going for us. I guess that's my perspective.
I'm
Thanks.
happy to go next really quickly. So we are transitioning into corporate and bulk gifting right now. So I think in order to amplify, whether you work at Deloitte, whether you work at, you know, big companies, is recommending small independent women-owned businesses because that dollar and buying power at that level really trickles down into our communities faster than having one small purchases a day, and it allows you to support other women. So that's what we're currently doing right now, and we've been excited to get, you know, some big orders recently from an example is from Disneyland.
Oh, perfect. And Ashley, congratulations, Ellie. And Ashley, how about
That
you?
is so great, Ellie. You know what? Straighten each other's crowns is my like ending thought. You know, spreading the word, just we're such a close-knit community here, especially in British Columbia. Everybody knows somebody who's running a business who's a woman. So let's just go buy from them.
And thank you. And Kelsey, your database, like that's
Oh,
great,
yeah,
right?
I'm gonna plug that. So the biggest obstacle that I have found, we go like, okay, let's go support a woman in business. How do we find them? It's very hard to do that. And so we're very excited that we're going to be launching a database where we can have listings for women in business. We're going to have robust marketing campaigns that are front facing to the general public, to the end consumer, that we can plug and say, hey, look for, you know, if it's a brick and mortar shop, check out a women-owned brick and mortar shop. If it's services, if it's products that are online, and we can help drive real authentic visibility to these amazing women entrepreneurs and drive sales and make it much more easier and accessible for the community to support women in business. So very excited. We'll have more information, but that's our little plug.
Yeah, and we'll be sharing it as well. So thank you, Kelsey. So on that, thank you so much for joining us and for the stories being shared and the wisdom shared around as well. And just kind of the aha moments and the momentum that was created virtually on here. I have one last slide up because we have a program that has just launched. It's the SMART program. It's on demand, so learning anytime. We currently just have the HR one. I know we mentioned Love HR here a couple of times. We have an HR for small business, and then coming up, the financial fitness one is very shortly going to be launched, as well as strategic marketing. And so these are the kind of on-demand courses for that you kind of learn self-paced, but there is actually personal support at the end as well. And so check that out if you're looking for skills development courses on there. So other than that, I just want to thank you ladies for definitely joining us. And we'll definitely have a link. I know our comms team was on here already collecting all the links. Someone had asked whether or not there will be the links that were shared because so many were shared today. So other than that, happy International Women's Day, celebrating you all and celebrating our community. Thank you all for joining us.
Thanks, WeBC.
Thank you. Thank you.